If you could stand on the crescent bend of the Mississippi River in 1763, you wouldn't find the neon lights of Bourbon Street or the towering hotels of the modern CBD. Instead, you would be standing in a fragile, swampy outpost that had just been handed from the French crown to the Spanish Empire. Like a pawn on a chessboard, the air would be thick with the scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and the brackish rot of the surrounding cypress swamps. To the original French settlers, New Orleans was a struggle for survival against floods and fever, but to the world it was the gateway to a continent. In this video, I use modern AI tools to breathe life into the colonial sketches, lithographs, and maps that define this era, allowing us to walk through a city that was simultaneously European, Caribbean, and African long before it was ever American. The goal isn't just to see the history, but to feel the humidity on your skin and hear the rattle of carriage wheels on dirt streets when the city was less of a town and more of a daring gamble against the elements. Before the grand balconies of the French Quarter existed, there was the Emad of a colonial frontier. By the late 1760s, under Spanish rule, the city began to take on a more rigid, fortified shape. In this early colonial map, you can see the Vieux Carré, or Old Square, laid out as a strict grid of timber-framed houses. These homes had steep pitched roofs, a style brought from northern France, but they struggled to adapt to the Louisiana heat. The AI reconstruction shows us the reality of the 1770s. Streets that were often knee-deep in mud, cypress boardwalks that rotted within a season, and a massive earthen levee. That was the only thing standing between the citizens and the whims of the river. One of the busiest spots wasn't a shop, but the Place d'Armes, the square we now know as Jackson Square. In this 18th century sketch, you can see the open, dusty expanse of the square before it was a park. Imagine standing there in 1780, watching Spanish soldiers in their white and blue uniforms drill in the humidity, while enslaved men and women from the West Indies sold tropical fruits and spices. Nearby, you'd see the first brick buildings rising, a sign that the city was finally moving past its frontier phase and becoming a true colonial capital. However, the city we see today was actually forged in the ashes of catastrophe. Looking at this historical engraving of the Great Fire, you can see the terror of the flames consuming the wooden heart of the city. On Good Friday in 1788, a fire started at the home of a Spanish official, fueled by a strong wind, consumed over 800 buildings in a matter of hours. A second Great Fire followed in 1794. These disasters wiped out almost all the original French-style wooden architecture. When the city rebuilt, it did so with Spanish sensibilities. Thick brick walls, heavy arched doorways, and lush interior courtyards designed to catch the breeze. This is the New Orleans we recognize. These architectural drawings from the late 1790s, you can see the blueprint for the St. Louis Cathedral and the Cabildo as you look at these reconstructions. Notice the lack of ornate ironwork. In the late 18th century, balconies were mostly made of simple wood. The city felt dense Mediterranean and slightly claustrophobic, with the smell of lime, mortar, and baked clay hanging in the air, as the Spanish strove to make the city fireproof and grand. The year 1803 changed everything. With the stroke of a pen in the Louisiana Purchase, this Catholic French-speaking, Spanish-styled city suddenly became part of the Protestant, English-speaking United States. In this famous painting of the transfer ceremony at the Place d'Armes, you can see the French flag being lowered and the American flag rising. But as this reconstruction shows, the Americanization of New Orleans didn't happen overnight. The city remained a cultural island. When the first American governors arrived, they found a place where the Sabbath was celebrated with dancing and gambling rather than quiet prayer. You would have noticed a distinct line in the sand, forming at Canal Street. In this early 19th century illustration of the city's layout, you can see the wide divide of Canal Street, separating the two worlds. To the east was the Creole city, the French Quarter with its European traditions. To the west, the American sector began to rise. The AI highlights this friction. On one side of the canal, the elegant, crumbling colonial architecture. On the other, the beginning of brick warehouses and Greek Revival townhomes. By the 18, the city faced its greatest existential threat during the War of 1812. In this dramatic engraving of Battle of New Orleans, you can see the chaos of the Jeanette plantation just downriver, however. The city was the prize. Imagine the tension in the French Quarter as General Andrew Jackson's ragtag army marched out of the city to face the British. The Reconstruction shows the celebrations that followed, a moment that fused the city's disparate cultures together under a single American identity. This victory launched a period of unprecedented wealth. In this sketch of the riverfront from 1820, you can see the first primitive steamboats beginning to crowd the levee. By the 1820s, the levee was a forest of smokestacks and masts. You would have heard a deafening chorus of steam whistles and the shouting of merchants in 3 different languages, loading white gold, cotton onto ships bound for Liverpool and New York. The 1830s represented the peak of the city's antebellum splendor and its deepest moral contradictions. In this beautiful lithograph of the original St. Charles Hotel, you can see its massive white dome dominating the entire skyline. The AI reconstruction takes us inside this hotel, opened in 1837, which was then considered one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. But beneath the glamour of the masquerade balls, there was the grim reality of the domestic slave trade. In this harrowing newspaper illustration from the mid-1830s, you can see the reality of the slave auction that took place in the heart of the city. Standing on a street corner in 1835, you would see the height of luxury passing by, the sight of human beings being sold like cargo. It was a city of extreme beauty and extreme cruelty. As we reach 1840, New Orleans is no longer an experiment. It is a titan of commerce. In this panoramic drawing of the port from 1840, you can see a city that looks most infinite in its growth. The city canal systems and the early railroads, like the Pontchartrain Railroad, all speak to a city that believed its expansion would never end. But the shadows were lengthening. Yellow fever, the saffron scourge, claimed thousands of lives every summer. In this somber draw of a New Orleans cemetery, you can see the unique above-ground tombs that were already becoming a city hallmark. Sometimes when I look at these AI-restored images of the old levee at sunset, I wonder if the people living there knew how fragile it all was. They were building a world on silt and shadow, yet they built it with a style and a soul that no other city on earth could replicate. These streets and these stories are the DNA of the modern Crescent City. I really appreciate you joining me for this.